We always like to welcome our listeners to another episode of Truth Seekers, and we have Brian joining us today, and we're sure to have a riveting conversation. Of course, you can check us out at proadvisorcoach.com, and then wherever you watch podcasts, Truth Seekers, hashtag Truth Seekers on Apple Podcasts, and Truth Seekers with Josh and Nick. So Brian, talk to us. What is going great right now, and what is there to celebrate in your life?
Well, I guess I'm very fortunate in that a lot of things are going very well right now, and there's a lot for me to celebrate. I think probably the most exciting thing that I've done here recently was on December 31st of last year. I took one of my companies, which was literally the largest company that I founded and I started, a company by the name of A.M. King, which is a design and construction firm. And we converted it from me being the sole owner to a 100% employee-owned company. It was a process that we spent about 2 years working on. And it was a long process, I guess a difficult process, but at the end of the day, a very rewarding process, because what it did, it gave me the opportunity to take a company that I owned 100% and I founded and I grew and became very successful, and to allow that to become an employee-owned company and allow the employees now to take that next step. So it was an ownership transition, more so than just transitioning ownership, but really allowing the second generation of that company to begin and to let the employees take over and really make that company their own for the future.
It's so cool to reflect on this, right? In just a couple minutes time, you just summed up a couple of years work right there. And I'm sure there's stuff before that. So I'm curious, where did that idea originate? Like, what was the intention behind that? Why was that a focus, and why is that a celebration of yours today?
Well, that's a long story, I guess, to talk about. But, I founded the company in 2004, so 17 years ago. And it was my first venture as an entrepreneur. And since then, I've done a number of other entrepreneurial ventures, but that was my first one. And it was, it is very close to me, obviously, from a personal perspective. But the other thing you realize is when you have a company that goes on to become successful, is that it's not because of you. Obviously, you're a part of that, but it's because of the people that are there. And, there's been individuals at that company that have been with me almost that whole 17-year period, and a number of others that came on, right out of college, and have been with us for many, many years. So, on a couple levels, first off, I'm 58 years old. So I did not want to be that person that was trying to figure out what to do with their company when they're in their late 60s and their 70s. I wanted to have that plan in place. And so I knew I wanted to develop some sort of transition. And, there's a couple of options. You can sell the company. And we were getting qualified offers from competitors, private equity, other folks wanting to buy the company over the years. So that was certainly an option. But when I looked at the individuals that had been with the company so long and that had really been such a part of the success, I really kind of felt like they were the ones that should take over the company. And so we did an ESOP, an employee share ownership plan. And it just seemed like the right thing to do at the end of the day. It seemed like the right transition. So what we've done is I'm still involved. The beauty of an ESOP is that I'm still involved with the company. I'm still the CEO and president of the company for the near future. So we've done the ownership transition, but now the leadership transition will happen over the next few years. So it gave us the opportunity to transition leadership from myself to the next level of leadership within the organization. And it really gives the folks that are now the owners of the company, it really gives them a vested interest. And we've seen that just in these first few months of, we have a great culture at that company, but I've just seen the culture shift ever so slightly, even more to the positive, because of the vested ownership that they have now in taking that company into the future.
That's exactly what I was going to ask, actually, Brian. So thank you for going to that thought process, because that's what was really going to jump out for me. I've been part of ESOPs before, so I understand how that works. And one of the things that we work on here is really creating through coaching and consulting, creating ownership, right? Because people are often looking for accountability, which is fine. There's nothing, but it always feels like you're putting something up a hill. And so I think the transition is like accountability to engagement through to ownership. And whether you are an actual owner or not, if you're acting like that, things tend to change. So that's why I was really interesting to see that process that you've managed to create because of that as well. So I wonder, like, from your looking back, thinking at it from a legacy point of view, how does that differ? How does that feel in difference between what you could have sold? And I'm sure the people that you would have sold it to would have been great people that would look after that and then go forward. But how does that feel in terms of like the potential you set up for legacy?
So I really spent the majority of my career with primarily one company prior to starting this company in 2004. And that company went through two different buyouts. When I joined it, it was a privately held company, one of the largest in the state of North Carolina. And I joined them right out of school. And then they were bought by a large British firm, which was a publicly held firm. And then a few years later, they were bought by an Australian firm. So I experienced that ownership transition. And I don't want to sit here and say that it was a negative, because there were certainly some positives. I learned a lot from working for those two other ownership groups, especially since they were global companies, and the experience that I gained and the lessons that I learned were phenomenal. But what I really did experience as being an employee was a disconnect. And maybe that was me, maybe it was the ownership, maybe it was the culture. I don't know, but I know it became very difficult to feel like I had a vested interest in that organization as I did when it's a privately held company. And I can't explain why. And I certainly know I wasn't the only employee that felt that way. And I think that's one of the things that led me to start my own company. But I did not want that for AM King. Like I said, the folks that had joined me early on, and the folks that had joined us right out of school or at a pivotal moment in their career, and that really dedicated their careers to this company, and they did take ownership. They took, at our company, we use the term personal responsibility. In fact, it's even in our mission statement. And it's really one of the principles that has sort of guided us through the years. And what we mean by that is taking personal responsibility for the work that you do, whether that's working with a client, whether that's working with a process, whether it's working with your coworkers, working on a project, whatever. And we had so many individuals that, accepted that idea of personal responsibility in their everyday work, that I just felt like there would be so much more power in transitioning the company to an employee ownership versus going out and selling it to a third party. Not that there's something wrong with that happens all the time. And look, I have started companies and I have sold them to third parties. So I'm sitting here and I don't want to paint myself as some sort of saint that I'm immune to that, because I've done that. And it's been very successful for me personally and for the folks that were at the company. But for this organization, it did not seem like the right path to follow. Yeah. So to your point of owning something, Nick, I mean, I subscribe to that. I've written about that on my blog. I think that is a powerful, powerful principle to grow a career upon. I did a podcast not long ago with a young lady, and she just, used the term of owning it. You own it. Whatever it is that you're doing, you own it. And I think it's a very good way of putting it.
Yeah, for sure. I love the fact that you have that in your, the personal responsibility in your mission statement. It's a big thing that I often share with clients that I start working with them is to think in that mindset, right? Think about responsibility. Because I often think about the opposite to that as well. Because if you're not taking responsibility, what are you doing? For me, it's some kind of blame, some flavor of blame. whether it's blaming yourself, blaming others, blaming something that's outside you. If you're not taking responsibility, you're trying to find a home to put this blame thing.
Right.
So I think if you're taking responsibility, what you're saying is that there is no blame to place. Stop trying to search for a place to put it and just stop wasting time, frankly, and just take responsibility. Because all responsibility is, because it can feel really heavy, but all I believe it is just the ability to respond. If you just break down the word, it's just like saying, okay, what can I do about this? Is there something I can do here? If not, then okay, then let's move on. If there is, okay, let's do it. Let's step up, because that's where the ultimate value is. And if you're only going to do that if you feel like that you own it, if you feel like there's something on the line, you feel like that you've taken on some sort of risk. And it's easy to get pushed away from that, because sometimes we want to be smaller because it's less risk, it's less fear, but there's also less value in that. It's like a scarcity. And it comes from experience where I spent 20 years working in the corporate world. I think about it is like, there's the huge world inside each of these huge companies. And on the surface, on the very outside, it actually touches things that matter. On the inside, it's just a lot of like moving things around, like just moving sand around the sandbox. And for most people, there's no connection to those outside. It's just like it becomes like very political and red tape centric, and no one can get anything done. So I thank you for sharing what you did there. I think it's very powerful and a massive lesson that not only can this be achieved on a smaller scale, but you can achieve it at a bit large company scale through ESOPs and such schemes. So kudos for you. Thank you for sharing that, Brian. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, you can achieve it at a larger scale. It's certainly, I think, better achieved within teams on the larger scale. But certainly, I've known large corporations have been able to achieve that culture of personal responsibility. And Nick, as you know, the next step of that is that term that's been being passed around a lot now, but it's been around a long time, is servant leadership. And personal responsibility is taking that responsibility for what you're doing, owning what you're doing, and making sure that whatever it is you're doing it the best you can, and you're seeking the best results for your coworkers, your clients, your employees, whatever. Personal responsibility is taken to the next level and making it all about those other people. And that I think there's just so much power in going beyond personal responsibility into servant leadership and trying to understand what you can do to benefit others that are within your business circle. And I'm talking business here primarily. Obviously, it works in your private life as well, but others within your business circle. And again, if you're serving a customer, how can you best serve that customer? If your customer is internal, so they're your coworkers, how do you best serve them? If you're working for an individual, that how do you best provide for that, to make sure that individual can succeed? So that level of personal responsibility can be elevated, to that servant leadership. And once you get to that point, it's very hard to find success to be elusive, if you will. You're going to succeed. That's right. Maybe against your best efforts.
Yeah. I know that one of your things right now, Brian, is sharing a lot of your lessons that you've learned through those earlier corporate experiences and then through your entrepreneurial path. Mm-hmm. So what might you say to someone that is just starting out on their journey or a few years into those different areas? How would you connect that servant leadership concept with someone who hasn't experienced it yet? Because there can be a disconnect sometimes, like, hey, hang on, like I'm trying to do this for me. So if I'm focusing on doing things for others, like how does that fit in? Because when you've experienced it, you know that it is hard to avoid success if you do that. But what's the practical application of sharing with someone that hasn't experienced that for themselves yet?
That's a really good question. You're right. I do spend a lot of time, writing about and speaking to, or at least I used to speak to pre-pandemic, to a lot of students and young professionals. And you get a lot of these questions, and they're phrased in different ways, but the question is, how do I get to the next level? I'm in this job, or I'm in this role, and I sort of understand my role and I understand my job, and I want to succeed. I want to go to the next level. And how do I do that? Is it all about working harder? Is it about working smarter? Is it about taking more risk? If just recently I had some time with two young entrepreneurs, and I say young in the sense of they're young men, both were men, and they're young in their entrepreneurial ventures. And I spent a lot of time with both of them talking about a lot of different things. But one of the things that when I talk to these folks, whether it's the students or the young entrepreneurs, whatever, one of the things that I find that really jumps out at me as a skill set to develop is what I call it, it's a discipline focus or a focus discipline. It's so, and I struggled with this when I was young. It's so easy that you have a lot of ideas, you have a lot of energies, you have a lot of passions, you have a lot of things that you want to accomplish, a lot of goals, a lot of ambitions. And it's really easy to kind of go from one to the next and one to the next. And sort of what I say, especially to the young entrepreneurs, is really try to get your arms around a focus. And I don't mean, the day to day, focus on what you're doing so that you're not, you're working on something and you get your mind wanders and you want to go surf the internet or something. I'm talking about, whether it becomes a 5-year plan or an annual goals or whatever, but focusing on what you really want to achieve, what you really want to accomplish. I'm a big strategy guy. I mean, at my companies, we do strategic planning every year, and then we update it, in the middle of the year. And we set goals and we set initiatives, and every team has to do that. And then for my leaders, I go to them and I say, I want to know what your goals are for the year. And I want those goals to be very specific. I want them to be, achievable. I want them to be measurable. And I want them to be in writing. And that's what I'm telling these young people is think about what you really want to accomplish, what you really want to see yourself at in the next 12, 18, 24 months. And then develop a focus on getting there. And then it becomes the blocking and tackling, if you will. Then it becomes what are the plans that you need to get there? So then that's where you start thinking about things like servant leadership. You start thinking about who you can assist, because at the end of the day, that's going to assist you. You start thinking about who do you need to be working with? Who do you need to be working around? Where do you need to be prioritizing your time? But it all has to start with that overall general focus. And I said it a while ago, I'm 58 years old. I've been very fortunate. I've had a lot of success, and I've owned a number of companies, and I still every year sit down and put together my list of goals. And I revisit those goals every few months. And sometimes some of them get peeled off because they're not relevant anymore. Sometimes I add another one, but generally they stay the same goals. I don't hit every one of them every year. I wish I could say I did, but I don't. And I've got some that have been on the list. They were an annual goal and it's been on the list for 5 or 6 years because I still haven't hit it. But that doesn't make it any less of an important goal to me. So I still have that focus of what I want to be. I use the term what I want to be when I grow up, and what I want to do and where I want to spend my time. And I think that's one of the things that I would really advise, especially the young entrepreneur who's starting out in business, to say, okay, where's your focus at with this company? Where's your focus at with this organization? Where's your focus at for the next 12 months? What do you need to be doing to make this successful?
Brian, your answer, I'm going to grab my microphone. I just want to speak into, I know I'm probably going to get feedback. Maybe Rob, our podcast editor, you can leave this feedback in here. Listeners, are you listening? It's so cool to hear more and more successful people share the same things. The more clear we can be about our goals, and you're still doing this after having, so many successful businesses in your endeavors, still doing this. This is not a secret. Start doing these things. The more clear you can be about where you want to go, like you said, it becomes the blocking and tackling. The actions become so aligned with where you want to go that clarity is the word that rings true for me. And you're just so clear on where you're going, how you're going to get there, and then all that's left is falling in love with the journey, which is the biggest secret of it all, right? If you can enjoy the process of getting there, then where you're going is just the victory lap. You can just enjoy all facets of that. So I so appreciate your answer there, because you started in a place of, where can you assist? Because that's how you get assisted. I think that's so cool, because it comes back to you. It's putting out into the universe what you want in return, but being that for yourself first, being the leader, being the servant leader. So thank you for that answer. I love it. Coach, what did you notice about his answer? What stuck out to you the most?
Oh, I'm just so fired up right now because Brian, you just went through the whole spectrum of basically what we see every day. And the reason why I do this is because there's so much more people can achieve. And as Coach said, it's not a secret. It's not a secret. And it's not about what you know, it's about doing what you know consistently over time, right? The process we work in is the AAA process. It's awareness, action plan, achievement. And you just shared all those things, Brian, not in those words, of course, but awareness is like, what do you want in your life? Because you ain't going to get there otherwise. Like that focus you said also for me is intention. Where are you? Why are you doing the job that you're doing? Or why are you starting the business you're starting? What's your intention? Where are you going? What's going to be success? And once you've got that thing, then it's focused on the blocking and tackling, the action plan. What am I doing daily? And then the consistent part of it is the achievement, which is like recycle it. And the tighter you can keep that feedback loop, the quicker you're going to get to your outcomes. I just get so fired up. Absolutely. It's like, look, let's just nail down what it is you want. Just get super focused and get intention about it. Be disciplined in that approach, and you will get there. That is just how it works. It's just how it works. It doesn't matter what you want, you'll get there. If you're committed enough, there's always a way. So thank you so much for sharing those things that you did, Brian, because I get passionate about this stuff.
Yeah.
I can tell. That's great. I mean, that's great. I love to see the passion, and I'm passionate about it too. And I'm Josh, when you said, we hear it all the time. I hope I don't sound like a broken record.
Not at all.
But no, it is just so important to, as you said, to figure out where you want to go and to put that down and start focusing on that and continue to have the discipline to stay with it. That's the other thing is the discipline piece. And that's where I really see, I see a lot of businesses that have been in business for 2 or 3 years and they become very successful. And then all of a sudden things happen. And usually what I see is the business becomes even more successful. And what's happening is the business owner is taking on more and more and more, and they're growing in different areas, and they're hiring more people. And it's almost like, the bad movie, and you can predict the ending, because usually what happens is then the business goes off the cliff. And it's because they lose the discipline to remember what that focus is. I mean, at my company, every company that I've started has had a very specific discipline in terms of, why we exist, what do we do, how do we do it, how are we going to work, who are our customers going to be. And I can tell you, as we've grown, you get other opportunities. And that leads to the opportunity to diversify. And we'll use that beautiful word, diversify. And that's usually not good for the business. It's because, at one time you had the focus and you had the goals and you had the ambitions and you were working on the blocking and tackling, but then you start losing your discipline. And that's when the bad stuff happens. So, that would be my next, conversation with that young entrepreneur that has started that business and gotten it up to a certain point. And I keep using the term entrepreneur. It also happens with business. It happens with the individual, right? It happens with the individual in their career. They take on too much of their career, or they start losing discipline of where they want their career to go. But so you have to start with the focus, but then you have to have the discipline to maintain that focus and to control that focus as you grow.
So cool to talk about this. A lot of, I would say the majority of the guests that we have on our podcast are more in the transformational phase or in the beginning stages of entrepreneurship, or maybe at a mature level. So to talk to you and to get an even greater insight on what the back end of that looks like, and doing something even greater than yourself and giving back to people who took care of you, right? That's, I believe, kind of how you phrased it. But I'm wondering, Brian, as we gather some takeaways, and we want to be able to share some principles that the audience can maybe apply to their own lives. What's maybe something, and you kind of already answered this question in terms of a takeaway. So maybe we can frame something like, what's a lesson that you learned the hard way? Like, there's so much wisdom here. There's so much takeaways that we could just jump to from your experience and what you're doing now. And it seems, like there's a lot of clarity, but it probably wasn't all that way. Is that true? Is there something that you can remember in your corporate experience or even in your entrepreneurship where it was a tough lesson, but that's where a lot of this originated from?
At the beginning of this podcast, I talked about the people that I've had the privilege to work with, over the years, and I'm specifically talking about at the companies I started, but folks that have joined up with us and have really committed their careers and to a large extent their lives to help build the organizations. And what you learn is how important people are to anything you're trying to accomplish, to any success you have, whether it's a business success or whether it's a personal success. And you really have to develop the ability to listen to and learn from and rely upon others. And I struggled with that for a while. I struggled with, not that I felt like I knew everything, but maybe I did feel a little bit like I knew, more than most people. And so it took me a while to learn that ability, to develop that ability to listen to, learn from, and rely upon others. On the flip side of that, one of the lessons that I really had to learn is when you make a mistake from a hiring perspective, is you need to correct that mistake. I'm a big fan of Jim Collins and the books he wrote, Good to Great, Built to Last, those books. And one of the things he talks about is getting the right people on the bus. So if any of your listeners have read, especially Good to Great, if they haven't, they should read it. But if they read it, they know what I'm talking about. It's getting the right people on the bus is getting the right people in the organization. And when you don't get the right person, make that decision to separate yourself from those people. And again, I don't mean that. I mean, we've hired some individuals that are wonderful, wonderful people. They just weren't right fits for us culturally. And sometimes I've been slow to do that. So I think if you ask any business leader, and I think if you ask any entrepreneur what their biggest challenges were, it's usually going to be something to deal with individuals. It's either going to be trusting individuals, relying upon individuals, giving up control to other individuals, hiring other individuals. It's a people game. It's, and that's what it is. And we're all human. We're all tremendously flawed. We're all also beautiful, intelligent beings. And some of us can work together, some of us can't. Some of us work well in certain situations, some of us work better in other situations. So it's really finding the right individuals and getting those right people on the bus and making sure the wrong ones aren't on the bus. And I think, again, a lot of my success has been due to the fact that, I've been really fortunate to have some good folks around me that really have supported me and have taught me and have encouraged me and have covered for me and, all of those things. So, hopefully I've been able to do some of the same for them. But I think when I think of, mistakes I've made, it's usually a mistake involving an individual.
Oh gosh, people first, people first, people first, people first.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
We talk about, and like communication, everything usually boils down to communication, right? And that's just people. Thank you for mentioning Good to Great, right people on the bus. You're like, it's not it's not the people that you fail to hire that hurt you, it's the ones you fail to fire that tend to. And I know you mentioned earlier about the hedgehog concept, even though you didn't say that, but about like sticking on what you know is successful. Yes, absolutely recommend that. Thank you so much, because it's so important for us. We know that like everything comes back to people, right? It's something that for me, that's my biggest takeaway today, just an underscore of that, right? It's whatever it is that you're doing, whatever endeavor you're in, even if it's outside of business, career, entrepreneurship, ultimately it comes down to people. We're social beings. We are people, right? It's going to be, that's the thing that's going to make the difference to the quality of our lives.
Yeah, business is personal. And I did a blog post years ago, and I said, this whole dictum of this is not personal, it's just business. That's a bunch of BS. Yeah. Business is very personal. And we spend a third of our lives in our business, whatever that business is. We spend a third of our lives doing that. So to sit here and say that's not personal is really just a bunch of crap. So, it is personal, and it's personal to the other person as well. Again, whether that other person is your coworker, it's your boss, it's your employee, or it's your customer. And I don't care. I mean, I've been involved with companies in the manufacturing sector, and no person makes that product. It's 100% automated product. But there's still people that have to run that machine. There's still people that have to program. There's still people that have to sell that. I don't care what business it's in. It's a people business. And any entrepreneur, any young person starting out in the business world or trying to navigate themselves through the business world or the entrepreneurial world is going to be better served by understanding that.
Mm. I think I'm going to arrive there myself with my takeaway and just finalize the triumvirate here of people first. That's what it's all about. It's what we preach in coaching, right? We meet people where they need to be met. How can we make where they're at and their mindset and their lives and their success just a little bit better? Just take them to the next level. You mentioned that a little bit yourself, Brian, with that. What else is there? There's always more. So just want to really thank you and appreciate you joining us today. It's such an interesting perspective from somebody who's been in the game and is on the back end of it. So it's a very interesting perspective to share with our listeners. So thank you very much for that.
Well, thanks for inviting me again. I've enjoyed it. Really enjoyed talking to you too. So it's been a great conversation. And I appreciate the passion, Nick and Josh. I appreciate hearing that during our conversation. It was great.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you, Brian.
Yeah. Any last word? And we'll give you the last word. If you want to share anything, you can share about your businesses if you want to, or just send a message to people. What would you say to them, Brian?
I tell you, here's going to be my last word, because we mentioned the book Good to Great, and my last word is going to be read. If you are a business person, in other words, if you have a job, if you're a business person, you need to be reading. And there's so much great stuff out there to read. All the way from books that are How to Win Friends and Influence People, which was written back a long time ago, before I was born. So that means it's really old. To Jim Collins books. There's just so much stuff out there. So if you really want to elevate your career, if you really want to elevate your business, re-educate yourself. And the best way to educate yourself is reading. And podcasts are a great way. I love podcasts. It's my go-to on the long business drives that I take. But there's no better teacher than the written word. So that's going to be my takeaway is, read, and read.
Love it. I'm going to go pick up a book, I think. Brian, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. We'll see you on our next edition of Truth Seekers.
All right. Thanks, fellas.
Thank you.
Bye.